Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Neptune's Pride and watched the massive alien ships drift past his small vessel like metal mountains floating in space. His human crew of 32 looked tiny compared to the thousands of warriors aboard each Centauri battlecruiser. The viewing screen showed at least 50 alien warships gathered around the neutral station called Harmony Point. And Jake knew his ship was probably the smallest one there. The Galactic Council had called this emergency meeting 3 days ago when the first reports came in about something called the Devourers. Jake had read the briefings twice, but still found it hard to believe that an entire alien race could just appear from nowhere and start destroying everything in their path. The reports said these creatures moved like a swarm of angry insects, consuming whole planets and leaving nothing behind except empty space. Jake's communication officer, Lieutenant Pete Davis, turned around in his chair with a worried expression on his face. The young man had been with Jake for 2 years now, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and he still got nervous around the bigger alien ships. Pete cleared his throat and spoke in a quiet voice that showed his concern about their situation. "Captain, we just received another message from Admiral Carter. She says the council meeting is about to begin, and we should maintain our position here with the other patrol vessels. The Admiral also wanted me to tell you that Earth Command sends their regards and hopes everything goes smoothly today." Jake nodded and tried to look confident for his crew, even though he knew they were all thinking the same thing. What could humanity possibly contribute to a war effort when their entire space fleet consisted of exactly 12 ships? The other council races had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years, while humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their technology was basic, their weapons were simple, and their military experience was limited to small conflicts between Earth's old nations. The massive Centauri ships dominated the area around Harmony Point like metal predators waiting to hunt. Each one was at least 5 times larger than Neptune's Pride and carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Jake had met some Centauri warriors during diplomatic functions, and they always seemed amused by human attempts at military protocol. They were a proud species that valued strength above everything else, and they made no secret of their opinion that humans were too weak to survive in a dangerous galaxy dot next to the Centauri fleet. The sleek vessels of the Kelphin Republic gleamed like silver needles against the black space. The Kelphins were known throughout the galaxy as the most technologically advanced race in the Council. Their ships moved without making any sound, and their weapons could strike targets from distances that seemed impossible. Jake had heard rumors that a single Kelphon destroyer could take on 10 enemy ships and win without taking any damage. The most mysterious ships belonged to the Void Lords, an ancient race that rarely spoke during council meetings and never shared details about their military capabilities. Their dark vessels seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and Jake sometimes wondered if they were actually there or just shadows playing tricks on his eyes. The few times he had seen Void Lords in person, they moved with the quiet confidence of beings who had survived countless wars and emerged victorious from each one. Admiral Lisa Carter was already aboard Harmony Point for the emergency session, representing humanity in discussions that would determine the fate of multiple star systems. Jake admired the Admiral's calm demeanor and steady leadership, but he also knew she faced an almost impossible task. How could she convince the other council races that humans deserved a role in the coming war when everyone knew humanity was the weakest member of the Alliance? Lieutenant Commander Mary Johnson, Jake's second-in-command, walked over to his position and handed him a datapad containing the latest intelligence reports about the Devourer advance. Mary had served in Earth's Navy before joining the space fleet, and her experience with military strategy made her invaluable during situations like this. She pointed to several red markers on the star chart that showed how quickly the enemy was moving toward the core worlds. Captain, according to these reports, the Devourers have already consumed everything in the Outer Rim sectors 7 through 12. The Zenthari lost an entire battle group trying to slow them down, and even the Kelphans had to retreat from 3 different systems. Whatever these creatures are, they don't fight like anything we've encountered before. Jake studied the data and felt a chill run down his spine when he saw the casualty numbers. The combined fleets of 3 major council races had barely managed to delay the Devourer advance, and now the creatures were heading straight towards systems that contained billions of innocent civilians. The tactical analysis suggested that conventional military strategies were proving ineffective against an enemy that seemed to adapt and evolve with each battle. The communication system crackled to life with a message from Harmony Point's control center, announcing that all ship commanders should prepare for possible deployment orders within the next few hours. Jake looked around his bridge and saw the same determination in his crew's eyes that he felt in his own heart. They might be the smallest ship in the fleet, but they were still human beings with a duty to protect innocent lives from a terrible threat. Pete Davis received another transmission and quickly decoded the message before turning to face his captain. The young officer's expression showed both excitement and nervousness as he prepared to deliver what sounded like important news from the ongoing council session. Jake could tell from Pete's body language that whatever Admiral Carter was discussing with the other races, it was not going according to plan. Captain, Admiral Carter is requesting permission to address the full council about humanity's potential contribution to the war effort. Apparently, some of the other races are suggesting that human colonies should be evacuated rather than defended. They seem to think our military capabilities are too limited to make any meaningful difference against the Devourers. Jake felt anger rising in his chest at the implied insult to humanity's courage and determination. He had served alongside brave men and women who would gladly sacrifice their lives to protect others, regardless of whether their ships were the biggest or their weapons were the most advanced. The idea that humans should simply run away while other beings fought and died was completely unacceptable to everything he believed about duty and honor. The viewing screen showed Admiral Carter's shuttle returning from Harmony Point, and Jake knew from the timing that the council session had not lasted very long. Either the other races had quickly agreed on a strategy that included humanity, or they had dismissed human participation entirely and moved on to other matters. Given what Pete had just reported about evacuation suggestions, Jake suspected the meeting had not gone well for Earth's interests. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the communication screen a few minutes later, and her calm expression revealed nothing about what had transpired during the council session. She looked directly at Jake and spoke in the steady voice that had earned her respect throughout the human fleet. Her words were measured and careful, but Jake could detect something underneath her professional demeanor that suggested she was not entirely disappointed with the day's events. Captain Morrison, please prepare Neptune's Pride for immediate departure from this system. We have received new orders from Earth Command that will take us away from the main battle preparations. I will brief all ship commanders on our new mission once we reach a secure location. Until then, maintain communication silence and follow my flagship to the coordinates I am transmitting now. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency council meeting at Harmony Point, and the war against the Devourers was going much worse than anyone had expected. Captain Jake Morrison read the latest battle reports on his personal datapad while Neptune's Pride moved through hyperspace toward the Kelver system. The numbers were devastating and showed just how quickly the alien swarm was overwhelming the galaxy's most powerful military forces. The Zenthari Empire had lost 12 major battleships in the first week alone, including their flagship Crimson, thunder that had been considered unsinkable by military experts throughout the galaxy. The Kelphan Republic's advanced technology was proving less effective than predicted, with their energy shields failing against devourer bioweapons that seemed to adapt and evolve after each encounter. Even the mysterious Void Lords had been forced to retreat from 2 entire star systems, after suffering casualties that their ancient race had not experienced in over 1,000 years. Lieutenant Pete Davis turned around from his communication station with another urgent message from the Galactic Council's military headquarters. The young officer's face showed the same worry that had been growing among the crew ever since they received their current assignment. Jake knew that everyone aboard Neptune's Pride was wondering why they had been sent on what appeared to be a simple reconnaissance mission, while the rest of the galaxy burned under devourer attacks. "Captain, we just received a priority transmission from Admiral Carter. She says the Council has finally agreed to accept our offer of assistance in the war effort. Apparently, the situation has become desperate enough that they are willing to work with anyone who can help slow down the devourer advance." Jake felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern at this news. On one hand, he was glad that humanity would finally have a chance to prove their worth to the other Council races. On the other hand, he knew that being called in as a last resort meant the military situation was probably even worse than the official reports suggested. The fact that proud species like the Xanthari were asking for help from humans showed just how close the galaxy was to complete disaster. The mission briefing had assigned Neptune's Pride to work alongside a Kelphin science vessel called Silver, mined in exploring the outer regions of the Kelver system. Intelligence reports suggested that Devourer scout forces might be operating in that area, gathering information for a major assault on the heavily populated core worlds. Jake's orders were to observe and report enemy movements while avoiding direct confrontation whenever possible. Lieutenant Commander Mary Johnson approached Jake's command chair with a tactical analysis that she had been working on during their journey. Her experience with military strategy made her insights valuable, especially when dealing with an enemy that seemed to break all the conventional rules of warfare. Mary's expression showed both professional concern and personal curiosity about what they might encounter in the coming hours. "Captain, I've been studying the Devourer attack patterns from the previous battles, and I think I see something that the other races might have missed. These creatures don't just attack randomly like a wild animal swarm. They seem to be testing different defensive strategies and learning from each encounter. It's almost like they are conducting military experiments using our own forces as test subjects." Jake nodded as he considered Mary's analysis. The idea that the Devourers were not just mindless destroyers, but actually intelligent strategists, made them even more dangerous than anyone had realized. If these creatures could learn and adapt from each battle, then the conventional military tactics used by the Council races were probably doomed to fail, regardless of how many ships they threw into the fight. The hyperspace alarm sounded throughout Neptune's Pride as they prepared to drop back into normal space near the Kelver system. Jake could see the tension on his crew's faces as they made final preparations for what might be their first real combat encounter with the mysterious enemy. Everyone knew that their small patrol vessel was not designed for major battles, but they also understood that sometimes small ships could accomplish things that larger fleets could not. The viewing screen showed the Kelver system's 3 planets orbiting around a yellow star that looked very similar to Earth's sun. The Kelphin science vessel Silver Mind was already waiting at the agreed meeting coordinates, its sleek hull reflecting starlight like a mirror floating in space. Jake had worked with Kelphin crews before and found them to be professional and efficient, though they sometimes seemed puzzled by human military customs and procedures. Commander Zell-9, the Kelphin officer in charge of Silver Mind, appeared on the communication screen with the typical emotionless expression that characterized his species. The alien's large eyes showed no sign of concern or excitement as he delivered his report about the current tactical situation in the system. His voice carried the flat, mechanical tone that all Kelfons used when discussing military matters. Captain Morrison, our initial scans of the Kelver system have detected unusual energy signatures near the fourth planet's asteroid belt. The readings do not match any known technology used by Council races, which suggests possible Devourer presence in that region. My science team recommends maintaining maximum sensor distance while conducting detailed observations of the area. Jake acknowledged the Kelfin commander's report and ordered his crew to begin their approach toward the asteroid belt using standard stealth protocols. Neptune's Pride might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but human engineers had designed their ships to be quiet and difficult to detect when operating in silent running mode. Sometimes the best way to gather intelligence was to simply watch and listen without being noticed. The asteroid belt around Kelver 4 contained thousands of rocky chunks ranging in size from small boulders to objects larger than Earth's moon. Jake knew that such areas provided perfect hiding places for ships that wanted to avoid detection, whether they were friendly scouts or enemy raiders. The challenge would be distinguishing between natural asteroid movements and the deliberate actions of hidden spacecraft. Lieutenant Pete Davis suddenly straightened in his chair as his sensors detected something moving through the asteroid field. The young officer's training told him to report immediately, but his instincts suggested that whatever they had found was not behaving like a typical reconnaissance mission. His voice carried a note of excitement mixed with concern as he delivered his findings to the captain. Captain, I'm reading multiple contacts moving through the asteroid belt at high speed. The energy signatures definitely match the Devourer bioships described in our intelligence briefings. It looks like they're heading directly toward the inner system, where the civilian populations are located. Jake felt his pulse quicken as he realized they had stumbled into exactly the kind of situation their orders had told them to avoid. A direct confrontation between their small patrol vessel and a Devourer scout force would normally end with Neptune's Pride being destroyed in a matter of minutes. However, something about the enemy ship's movement patterns struck Jake as odd, almost like they were following a predictable routine rather than conducting an intelligent search. Commander, Zell-9's voice came through the communication system, with what sounded like genuine surprise in his normally flat tone. The Kelfin officer was reporting sensor readings that contradicted everything the Council races thought they knew about Devourer tactical capabilities. His science team had apparently discovered something that changed their understanding of how these creatures operated in small groups. Captain Morrison, the Devourer ships appear to be following a pre-programmed search pattern rather than conducting adaptive reconnaissance. This behavior suggests they may be less flexible and small numbers than our intelligence reports indicated. Perhaps we should consider testing their response to unexpected tactical maneuvers. Jake looked around his bridge and saw the same thought reflected in his crew's eyes. This might be their chance to learn something valuable about the enemy while helping to protect the innocent civilians in the inner system. Neptune's Pride was small and lightly armed, but human military doctrine had always emphasized using intelligence and creativity to overcome superior firepower. Sometimes the best weapon was simply doing something the enemy did not expect. Captain Jake Morrison made his decision in the span of 3 heartbeats. The Devourer scout ships were moving through the asteroid belt in a pattern that looked almost mechanical, following the same route that any computer program might choose when searching for hidden targets. Their bioships pulsed with a sickly green light that reminded Jake of diseased tissue, and he could see weapon ports opening along their hulls as they prepared to continue their advance toward the populated inner planets. Lieutenant Pete Davis kept his voice steady as he reported the enemy's position and movement, but Jake could see the tension in the young man's shoulders. Everyone on the bridge knew they were about to do something that went against their direct orders to avoid confrontation. Neptune's Pride was supposed to observe and report, not engage enemy forces in direct combat. However, Jake also knew that sometimes a ship's captain had to make choices based on what was right rather than what was safe. Pete, send a message to Commander Zell 9 and tell him we're going to try something unconventional. Ask him to monitor our approach and be ready to provide covering fire if things go badly. Also, make sure he understands that we're not following standard Council military doctrine for this engagement. The Kelfin commander's response came back within seconds, and his normally emotionless voice carried a hint of what might have been curiosity. Zell 9 had apparently run tactical simulations based on the current situation, and his computer analysis suggested that any direct attack would result in the destruction of both allied vessels. However, he seemed willing to trust human judgment, despite the mathematical odds against success. Captain Morrison, my science team has completed their analysis of the Devourer search pattern. We believe they are operating under some form of program behavior that limits their ability to respond to unexpected threats. If you can disrupt their formation without triggering their combat instincts, we may be able to study their adaptive capabilities in a controlled environment. Jake nodded and began issuing orders to his crew in the calm, confident tone that he had learned during his years of military service. Lieutenant Commander Mary Johnson moved to the weapons station and began making modifications to their torpedo guidance systems that would allow for more precise targeting. The changes she was implementing came from human military research that had been conducted during Earth's unification wars, back when different nations still fought each other with conventional weapons. Mary, I want you to program our torpedoes for proximity detonation rather than direct impact. We're not trying to destroy these ships immediately. We're trying to confuse them and see how they react to something they haven't encountered before. If we can make them break formation, we might learn something useful about their coordination methods. The engineering team worked quickly to recalibrate Neptune's Pride's weapon systems for what Jake was planning. Human military technology might not be as advanced as Kelfon energy weapons or Zenthari plasma cannons, but it had been designed with flexibility in mind. Earth's engineers had built their ships to be adaptable because they knew humans would probably face enemies with superior technology and would need every possible advantage to survive. Jake guided his ship through the asteroid field using manual piloting skills that most alien races had abandoned centuries ago in favor of computer navigation systems. His hands moved across the control interface with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to fly by feel rather than by relying entirely on automated systems. The ability to make quick, intuitive decisions was something that humans had retained even as their technology became more sophisticated. The first Devourer scout ship came into visual range just as Neptune's Pride emerged from behind a large asteroid. The battleship was smaller than Jake had expected, roughly the same size as his own vessel, but its organic hull seemed to pulse with its own internal rhythm. Weapon ports along its sides opened and closed like breathing gills, and Jake could see smaller organisms moving across its surface like parasites or maintenance crews. Lieutenant Pete Davis reported that the enemy ship had detected their presence, but was not immediately changing course or increasing speed. The Devourer vessel continued following its predetermined search pattern as if Neptune's Pride was just another piece of space debris that could be safely ignored. This behavior matched what Commander Zell 9 had predicted, but it still struck Jake as oddly mechanical for a supposedly intelligent species. Captain, the target is maintaining its current heading and speed. It's almost like they don't consider us a threat worth responding to. Should I target their weapon systems or try to disable their engines first? Jake considered his options while watching the enemy ship's movements on the tactical display. The Devourers had apparently encountered so many conventional military responses that they had developed standard countermeasures for most types of attacks. However, human tactical doctrine emphasized doing things that the enemy would not expect, using creativity and unpredictability as weapons just as important as guns and missiles. Fire 2 torpedoes at the asteroids on either side of the target. Ship, not at the ship itself. I want to create a debris field that will force them to change course. Let's see how they react when their environment changes, instead of when they're under direct attack. The torpedoes streaked away from Neptune's Pride and detonated exactly where Mary had programmed them to explode. Chunks of broken asteroid created an expanding cloud of rocky debris that blocked the Devourer ship's planned route through the asteroid belt. Jake watched his tactical screen carefully as the enemy vessel encountered this unexpected obstacle and had to make a decision about how to proceed. What happened next surprised everyone on Neptune's Pride's bridge. Instead of simply changing course to avoid the debris field, the Devourer ship stopped moving entirely and began transmitting some kind of signal to its companions elsewhere in the asteroid belt. Within minutes, 2 more bioships had joined. The first one, and all 3 vessels were hovering in space while apparently analyzing the situation. Commander Zell9's voice came through the communication system with barely contained excitement. The Kelfin science officer had been monitoring the enemy ships' transmissions and had discovered something that contradicted everything the council races thought they knew about Devourer intelligence and decision-making processes. His findings suggested that these creatures were not as independently intelligent as previous encounters had indicated. Captain Morrison, the Devourer ships are communicating with each other using a form of biological data transmission that appears to require consensus before taking action. They seem to be debating how to respond to your tactical modification of their environment. This behavior suggests they may be less adaptable as individuals than our intelligence reports have indicated. Jake realized they had stumbled onto something potentially important for the entire war effort. If the Devourers required group consensus to adapt to new situations, then their greatest strength might also be their greatest weakness. Small, fast attacks that prevented them from coordinating their responses could be more effective than the massive fleet engagements that the Council races had been attempting. Lieutenant Commander Mary Johnson reported that the 3 enemy ships had finally reached some kind of decision and were beginning to move again. However, instead of continuing their original search pattern, they were now moving in a formation that seemed designed to protect each other from further environmental disruptions. Their new behavior pattern looked much more cautious and defensive than their previous mechanical searching. Captain, they're adapting to our tactics faster than I expected. The lead ship is now scanning for more potential debris fields, while the other 2 are positioning themselves to provide covering fire. It looks like they learned from our first attack and are trying to prevent us from using the same method again. Jake smiled grimly as he realized that their little experiment had provided valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities, while also revealing something else entirely. The way his own crew had responded to the situation, the modifications they had made to their weapon systems, and the tactical innovations they had implemented on the spot were not things that other council races would have been able to accomplish. Human military doctrine was proving to be fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had seen before. The communication system crackled with an incoming message from Admiral Carter, who had apparently been monitoring their engagement through long-range sensors. Her voice carried a tone of satisfaction, mixed with something that sounded almost like anticipation. Jake had the distinct impression that their little reconnaissance mission was about to become something much more significant. Captain Morrison, excellent work on the tactical analysis. Your findings confirm some theories that Earth Command has been developing about Devourer coordination methods. Please prepare to receive new orders that will take you to a much more important assignment. It appears that humanity's time for hiding in the background is finally coming to an end. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of what appeared to be a simple transport vessel called Peaceful Journey as it moved toward the Chronos system where the largest battle of the war was about to begin. The ship's modest appearance and basic hull design made it look like just another civilian cargo hauler that had been pressed into military service during the emergency. However, the 12 officers working at various stations around the bridge were all wearing the dark blue uniforms of Earth's most elite military units. The tactical display showed a scene of absolute chaos as the combined fleets of 3 major council races struggled desperately against a devourer swarm that seemed to grow larger with each passing hour. Xanthari battleships were exploding in brilliant flashes of light, while Kelphin energy weapons proved useless against bio-armor that adapted faster than their targeting computers could compensate. The Void Lords had already lost 6 of their mysterious dark vessels and were considering a full retreat from the system. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system from Neptune's Pride, which was approaching the battle zone from a different vector, along with the rest of humanity's small task force. His report about the Devourer coordination methods had reached Admiral Carter just as Earth Command was implementing a plan that had been 50 years in the making. The timing was perfect, even though Jake had no idea what he had helped to set in motion. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system that don't match anything in our database of known Council technologies. The Devourers seem to be using some kind of biofusion reactors that generate power levels comparable to small stars. No wonder the conventional fleets are having trouble penetrating their defenses. Admiral Carter nodded as she listened to Jake's report while simultaneously reviewing status updates from other human commanders positioned throughout the galaxy. What the young captain didn't know was that every human colony, mining station, and trading outpost had been sending similar intelligence reports for weeks. The seemingly peaceful expansion of humanity across dozens of star systems had actually been the largest intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. Colonel Ben Hayes appeared on a secondary communication screen from his position aboard the cargo vessel New Horizons. His weathered face showed the calm confidence of a man who had spent 30 years preparing for this exact moment. Behind him, Admiral Carter could see row after row of what like standard shipping containers, but she knew that each one contained military equipment that would surprise every other species in the galaxy. Admiral, all ground forces are in position and ready for deployment. The orbital drop systems have been tested and calibrated for the specific gravity conditions on all 3 contested worlds. Our intelligence teams report that Devourer ground forces rely heavily on biochemical weapons that should be neutralized by the countermeasures we developed during the Mars training exercises. Admiral Carter checked her chronometer and saw that they were exactly on schedule for what Earth Command had designated as Operation Daybreak. The name was appropriate because humanity was about to show the galaxy something that had been hidden in darkness for 5 decades. Every human in space had been waiting for this moment, though most of them didn't fully understand what they were. Waiting for Dot, the bridge of Peaceful Journey suddenly came alive with activity as hidden panels slid open to reveal military control stations that had been concealed beneath civilian equipment. Admiral Carter's modest transport vessel began to transform around her as blast shields retracted from reinforced viewports and weapon systems emerged from disguised cargo bays. The ship's true identity was finally being revealed after years of careful deception. Commander Ryan Brooks, Admiral Carter's chief tactical officer, reported that all stealth systems were disengaging according to plan. Throughout the Chronos system, similar transformations were occurring as dozens of apparently civilian vessels revealed themselves to be fully armed military ships. The asteroid belt that surrounded the system's outer planets began to shimmer and fade as massive cloaking devices shut down for the first time in decades. Admiral, The Leviathan is requesting permission to come online. Captain Stone reports that all primary systems are functional and ready for combat operations. The crew has been at battle stations for the past 6 hours, and morale is extremely high. They're eager to show the galaxy what human engineering can accomplish when we stop pretending to be peaceful merchants. Admiral Carter felt a moment of pride as she thought about the incredible achievement that the Leviathan represented. The massive dreadnought had been built in secret over the course of 20 years, using resources and technology that had been carefully gathered from across human space. Its construction had required the cooperation of every human colony and the dedication of thousands of engineers who had worked without recognition or glory. The tactical display suddenly exploded with new contacts as the true scale of humanity's hidden fleet became visible for the first time. Ships that had been disguised as mining platforms revealed themselves as heavily armed battle stations. Cargo vessels split apart to release squadrons of fighters that had been hidden in their cargo holds. Even the small patrol ships, like Neptune's Pride, began to show their true capabilities as concealed weapon systems came online. Captain Jake Morrison's shocked voice came through the communication system as he watched his own ship transform around him. Panels that he had thought were decorative were sliding aside to reveal torpedo tubes and energy cannons. His modest patrol vessel was suddenly 3 times larger than it had appeared to be, with weapon systems that rivaled anything in the Zenthari fleet. "Admiral, what the hell is happening to my ship? My engineering officer says we've got enough firepower to take on a battle cruiser, and my sensor officer is reporting that there are hundreds of human vessels appearing throughout the system. How long has this fleet been here?" Admiral Carter smiled as she prepared to address not only Jake, but every human commander in the system. The time for secrecy and deception was finally over. After 50 years of being underestimated and dismissed by the other council races, humanity was about to reveal what they had truly been building, while everyone else assumed they were simply peaceful traders and explorers. All human vessels. This is Admiral Carter with authorization code Sunrise 77. You are hereby ordered to implement full combat protocols and engage all enemy forces within the system. Our friends in the Council fleets are about to learn why Earth Command has spent 5 decades preparing for this war. Show them what human military doctrine really looks like. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of human warships that had been hiding in plain sight for years suddenly burst into action with a coordination and precision that made the most disciplined alien fleets look amateur by comparison. Each ship moved to its assigned position in a battle formation that had been planned and rehearsed countless times during secret training exercises. The Devourer swarm that had been steadily overwhelming the Council fleets suddenly found itself facing an entirely new type of enemy: human. Weapons didn't rely on energy shields or plasma cannons like the technology used by other species. Instead, they used kinetic projectiles, explosive warheads, and tactical innovations that the bioships had never encountered before. Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan, Admiral Carter's communications officer, reported that the other council races were requesting immediate explanations for the sudden appearance of such a massive human fleet. The Zenthari were demanding to know why humanity had hidden their true military capabilities, while the Kelphins were asking for detailed technical specifications of the weapon systems they were observing. "Admiral, we're receiving priority messages from at least 6 different council commanders. They want to know how we built so many ships without anyone detecting the construction projects. The Void Lords are particularly interested in our stealth technology, and the Zenthari are asking if we've been planning some kind of military takeover of the galaxy." Admiral Carter looked out at the battle that was now raging throughout the Cronus system, as human forces engaged the Devourer swarm with tactics and weapons that no one else had seen before. The enemy bioships that had seemed unstoppable against Conventional attacks were now being systematically destroyed by human innovation and firepower. The tide of the war was changing so rapidly that some devourer formations were already beginning to retreat. Kate, send a message to all council commanders and tell them that humanity has never had any intention of conquest or domination. We built this fleet because we knew that someday the galaxy would face a threat that required unconventional solutions. Today is that day, and we're here to help our friends survive what's coming. 6 months after the Battle of Kronos, Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the observation deck of the UES Leviathan and watched as the last devourer homeworld burned in the distance. The massive planet that had spawned countless swarms of bioships was now nothing more than a glowing ember surrounded by the wreckage of humanity's most advanced weapon systems. The war that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization was finally over, ended not by the combined might of ancient alien empires, but by a species that most beings had considered primitive just 1 year ago. The tactical reports, streaming across her personal display, showed the complete scope of what humanity had accomplished during the final phase of the war. Every devourer nest world had been systematically located and destroyed by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere, whenever they were needed most. The bioships that had terrorized the galaxy for months were now extinct, their adaptive capabilities overwhelmed by human weapons that changed faster than any living organism could evolve to counter them. Captain Jake Morrison's face appeared on the communication screen from his position aboard Neptune's Pride, which was now revealed to be the command ship for an entire battle group of vessels that had been disguised as simple patrol craft. His expression showed a mixture of pride and exhaustion as he delivered his final combat report to Admiral Carter. The young officer had learned more about warfare in 6 months than most military commanders learned in entire careers. Admiral, the last devourer stronghold in Sector 9 has been eliminated. Our ground forces report no surviving enemy organisms on any of the contested worlds. General Clark's Marines have also completed the rescue operations for civilian populations that were trapped behind enemy lines. Total human casualties for the entire campaign were less than 3,000, which is remarkable considering the scale of the operations we conducted. Admiral Carter nodded as she processed the casualty figures that Jake had reported. 3,000 human lives lost was a tragedy that would be mourned on every human world, but it was also a number that seemed almost impossible when compared to the millions of alien casualties that other species had suffered during the early phases of the war. The difference was not that human lives were worth more than alien lives, but that human military doctrine had been designed to minimize losses through superior planning and overwhelming firepower. Commander Ryan Brooks approached Admiral Carter with a datapad containing the preliminary analysis of captured devourer technology and biological samples. The information his science teams had gathered during the war would keep researchers busy for decades, but it had already revealed something important about why the bioships had been so difficult for other species to defeat. The devourers had evolved specifically to counter the types of energy weapons and defensive systems used by most galactic civilizations. Admiral, our xenobiology teams have confirmed that the devourer species was artificially enhanced by some unknown intelligence millions of years ago. They were basically designed to be the perfect weapon against energy-based technology and organized military formations. However, they had no defense against kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, or the kind of irregular tactics that human forces used throughout the campaign. The irony was not lost on Admiral Carter that humanity's so-called primitive technology had turned out to be exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. While other species had spent thousands of years perfecting energy shields and plasma weapons, humans had continued to develop projectile weapons, explosive devices, and tactical doctrines based on their experience with conventional warfare. What the aliens had seen as humanity's greatest weakness had actually been their greatest strength. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Hayes reported from the surface of New Terra, one of the former Devourer nest worlds that was now being prepared for human colonization. His ground forces had discovered something during their planetary surveys that would change how the galaxy understood the threat they had just defeated. The Devourers had not been simply destroying civilizations for food or territory, but had been systematically collecting information about military technologies and defensive strategies. Admiral, we found data storage facilities on every nest world that contained detailed information about the weapons and tactics used by dozens of different species. The Devourers were learning from each battle and sharing that knowledge across their entire swarm network. They had complete tactical profiles for every major council race, which explains why conventional military strategies were so ineffective against them. Admiral Carter realized that the galaxy had been facing an enemy that had been preparing for this war for much longer than anyone had suspected. The Devourers had probably been studying galactic military capabilities for centuries, waiting for the right moment to launch their coordinated assault. The only reason they had been defeated was that humanity had never been included in their intelligence gathering, because no one had considered human military capabilities worth studying. The communication system activated with an incoming message from Harmony Point, where the Galactic Council was holding emergency sessions to discuss the post-war reorganization of interstellar politics. The alien delegates who had dismissed humanity just 1 year ago were now desperately trying to understand how such a small and apparently weak species had managed to accomplish what their combined fleets could not. The questions they were asking revealed just how completely they had misunderstood human nature and capabilities. War Commander Thex Ka of the Centauri Empire appeared on the main screen with an expression that mixed respect with confusion. The proud warrior who had once suggested that humans should simply evacuate their colonies was now requesting detailed briefings on human military doctrine and weapons technology. His tone showed genuine humility as he addressed Admiral Carter with the kind of respect normally reserved for legendary military leaders. Admiral Carter, the Centauri High Command wishes to express our gratitude for humanity's decisive intervention in this war. However, we must ask how your species managed to build such an extensive military force without any of our intelligence networks detecting the construction projects. Our analysts estimate that your fleet required at least 50 years of continuous development to reach its current capabilities. Admiral Carter smiled as she prepared to answer the question that every alien leader had been asking since the Battle of Kronos. The truth was both simpler and more complex than most of them would be able to understand. Humanity had not built their military in secret because they were planning conquest or deception, but because they had learned from thousands of years of history on Earth that peace could only be maintained by those who were prepared for war. War Commander. Humanity began preparing for this war the day we first encountered other intelligent species in the galaxy. We knew that eventually we would face an enemy that threatened everything we valued, and we wanted to be ready when that day came. Every human colony, every mining station, every trading outpost was designed with dual purposes in mind. We built schools and farms and factories, but we also built weapons and fortifications and training facilities. The concept seemed to puzzle many of the alien delegates who viewed military preparation and peaceful development as mutually exclusive activities. Most galactic species had either dedicated themselves entirely to warfare, like the Centauri, or had focused on science and exploration, like the Kelphons. The idea that a civilization could simultaneously pursue both peace and military readiness was foreign to their way of thinking. Commander Ryan Brooks reported that similar conversations were taking place on communication channels throughout human space as Earth's diplomats began the delicate process of explaining humanity's true nature to their galactic neighbors. The species that had been welcomed into the council as junior partners were now being recognized as the dominant military power in known space. And that shift in status would require careful management to avoid creating new conflicts. Admiral, Earth Command is requesting your recommendations for the post-war reorganization of Council military structures. They want to know if humanity should formally assume responsibility for galactic defense, or if we should continue to work within the existing alliance framework. There are advantages and disadvantages to both approaches. Admiral Carter looked out at the stars and thought about the responsibility that humanity had just inherited, whether they wanted it or not. The other species would now look to Earth for protection whenever they faced threats that their own forces could not handle. It was a burden that came with the power they had revealed, and it was one that would define humanity's role in the galaxy for generations to come. The final message came from Captain Jake Morrison, whose small patrol vessel had become the symbol of humanity's hidden strength during the war. His words carried the quiet pride of a species that had proven themselves worthy of respect, while staying true to their fundamental values of protecting the innocent and defending those who could not defend themselves. Admiral, I think I finally understand why we spent 50 years pretending to be weaker than we actually were. We weren't hiding our strength because we were ashamed of it, but because we hoped we would never need to.